Wow. They put us in the shade. Lastly, we're happy.
Oh, we're happy, all right.
We're in the shade. Thank you, Peter. Oh.
Just over here.
Thank you.
On the lean in my heels. See how that goes?
Make you look taller.
Yeah, obviously.
Calf workout.
That's what I'm going for. Yes,
Calf
yes.
workout.
I'll just do some calf raises.
Yeah. That's what we like. Audio level, David Crisafulli with Peter and Dale. Testing 1, 2, 3. We're all good to go?
All good. Thank you.
Well, good morning everyone and welcome from Townsville. I arrived yesterday and myself and our entire team will be here for the next 4 days. And we're here to listen. And we're here to show every Queenslander that they matter and that we intend to be a government for all of Queensland. And we intend to be an opposition that listens and acts. And in the next few days we will be meeting many hundreds of locals. In a moment I'll be joining Ros Bates for a tour of the hospital. The team will be meeting industry groups, we'll be meeting the local council, most importantly we'll be meeting Queenslanders. And I can tell you one of the issues that is at front and centre is the broken Youth Justice Act. And in a moment you'll hear from both Dale as our Shadow Police spokesperson as well as a local member here, but also Peter about her personal experience at home and at work. And that just shows you the consequences of the broken youth justice system. But I want to make a really clear point. When the Youth Justice Act was watered down in 2015, it was this city that called it out first. It was this city that said it will end in tragedy. And it was this city that was right. And on the back of the watering down of that act, we have a generation of repeat hardcore young offenders who know that their rights are greater than the rights of the victim. And for 8 years, the state government has said that there's nothing to see here, that it's all a figment of imagination and that there is no youth crime epidemic. Well, Queenslanders now across the state have worked out how bad things are, and it was this city that first called it out. And we hear about the reports overnight, and here we go again. And if you want to know and boil it down to why this is happening on a regular basis, well, you've got a government that is in chaos in Brisbane, and then you have youth crime that is in chaos on the ground in North Queensland. And it's that simple. And we have been putting forward our solutions repeatedly. And it started with breach of bail. For 2 years, we've been saying breach of bail has to be an offence in the Youth Justice Act. And for 2 years, the government said that simply would not work. Well, at the last moment, ahead of the parliamentary sitting, the government inserted our legislation word for word. But that is only the first of many steps that need to occur. We need consequences for action embedded in the Act. We need to unshackle the judiciary to be able to hand down appropriate sentences. And we need gold standard early intervention to turn kids around before the life of crime. And at the moment we are failing at both ends of the spectrum. We've got a crisis in the here and now where repeat offenders are ripping the heart and soul out of communities, and we've got the pipeline that is coming through and know that there is no consequences for bad behaviour. And we have to focus on both. We will be listening for the next 4 days to you, to this community. Every Queenslander matters, and this youth crime epidemic means something to us. We are going to be constructive, we're going to be diligent, and we're going to continue to put the spotlight on it until the government starts listening. But one way or another, change is coming. Queenslanders were promised they would be kept safe. And right now, there is a fear raging through the community that we are not comfortable with and Queenslanders are demanding action on. I'll hand over to Dale.
Well, another month of chaos on the streets of Townsville, and the figures don't lie. 112 motor vehicles stolen in the month of February, 366 break and enters, over 500 thefts, over 200 willful damage complaints for this particular area, and this community is hurting. A month of chaos under the umbrella of this state Labor government who have their priorities all wrong. It's a red alert for this community at the moment, and while the Premier's walking the red carpet, this community is being torn apart. A Premier who couldn't find 90 minutes on a weeknight to travel to Toowoomba last week to attend a crime forum, but could conveniently drive down the Gold Coast to go to a Harry Styles concert. It's about priorities, and it's about sending the message to this community that they actually care and are listening. And that's why the LNP opposition are here this week. We're here in numbers, and we're not just flying in and flying out. It's not about that, it's about getting on the ground, and already today we've been inundated by business owners, by residents who are absolutely fed up to the back teeth with what's going on in this community. They want action, they want some real leadership at a time when this community is being torn apart. How many more months of this mayhem and chaos do we have to put up with before we actually see some effective change from this Labor government? Premier spent the equivalent of the national wage on a Christmas party. Well, how about spending some of that money in this community? The minister's flown up here today. It's a pity he didn't load the plane with police officers and bring them to this community, because we need more boots on the ground. There's no bigger deterrent than a blue uniform out on the beat or driving around in a police vehicle. That's what we want from this government, and it's about time they stepped up to the plate and delivered.
Peter Mitchell. Yes.
And what do you do, Peter?
I'm the venue manager at the Sea Bar.
Tell us about your experience.
So we have been the victim of crime at the Sea Bar a couple of times. So a few years ago, it was the first incident in my time in management. They've busted through the glass, caused a big scene, come in, had to clean it up and try and trade. The same thing happened very recently. So it's such a big deal for us to have to go through all of the insurance, sort it out so that we can open back up and trade and as a regular business. So I've also had some personal experiences at my own home many years ago with a stolen car, but in the recent times, attempted break-in. They've tried to use the vice grips to get into my front door and obviously have failed, busted the lock, not actually gotten into my premises. Thankfully, have noticed the next day and, thankfully was not broken into. It's become an epidemic, obviously, and it's affecting everybody daily now, businesses, people personally, and it just can't keep continuing. I feel like there's not enough action being taken by this current government in order to put a stop to the crime and how bad it is right now.
For your own, you speak to the community, obviously, when they come to Sea Bar and dine here. What do you think the community sentiment is around this? Is it something that you hear a lot of people?
Oh, 100%. Everybody's fed up. It's not just our local community, it's the tourists, it's people visiting here. They're frightened now to come to Townsville in case of, bringing their cars here, travelling up and staying for a while. We would get a lot of business, specifically in this beautiful weather that we're coming into, from people down south. A lot of them relocate here for almost a few months, and that means they have to bring their cars and their caravans and things like that. And we're hearing that that's, not as common now. They're too scared. So.
How long ago was the last incident here?
At the Sea Bar, that was about a month ago, 6 months to 6 weeks ago.
And what happened next?
I got a call from security in the middle of the morning. We had an assailant come through and bust our glass on the side door with rocks or something of that. They have then entered the premises and went through trying to find what I believe was cash, because they opened the empty drawer till, didn't actually take anything but our tip money, so the poor little staff and their parties. But obviously the business didn't have any money stolen, thankfully, but both myself and my boss Alan, we had to come in at all hours of the morning, call the glass people, get on top of that straight away. We can't have, our business open for the evening, even with the alarm system on. So thankfully we got onto someone, we got it fixed within that night, and we did all the cleanup ourselves. So that was fun. And basically then it's just been all of the follow-up after that, all of the insurance to get through that. They have to pay an excess, As a business, we're just trying to get by week to week in this climate. Prices are going up all of the time. So then when you've got these added costs on top of that, that just hits our bottom line so hard, and we want to thrive. That's what we want for all of the Townsville community.
What specifically would you like to see change about crime situation?
Well, harsher penalties. I feel like the police are doing their best. I've called Police Link and the police multiple times now because of, a few things to do with work, just with people hanging around, wanting them moved on, things like that. And all of the time it's, you must appreciate that the police are really busy this evening. And I'm like, I do appreciate that. And I do feel for them. They're extremely busy to the point where sometimes they can't attend straight away, And so we come in and we have to, just hope that that person has left and we're not in any danger. So basically the police are struggling, and I just feel like the penalties are not harsh enough to keep these offenders away. They're reoffending every time. They've got no remorse.
So more boots on the ground, more police officers.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like if they can put the funding in to do that, then as Dale just said, like more boots on the ground, it's a force to be reckoned with. There's fear there. We need to put the fear into them. And look, honestly, we need to stop letting them out. I don't know what happens to do that, but they reoffend every time. Like I said, they do not care.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Peter. Lawrence, if you don't mind, I just want to make the point though, but doesn't that show why this matters? So there are consequences for it. So it costs the business in lost trade, there's then the insurance costs, and the same goes for individuals. And I stood with a young woman the other day who lost a car twice in a handful of months. So she went through the rigmarole, didn't have a vehicle for the better part of 2 months, had to get Ubers and taxis to work, which cost her. She missed a couple of shifts, and her insurance premium's gone from $80 to $118. So there are consequences for her every month for the rest of her life. There are consequences on this both socially and economically, and we've got to get serious about this.
Just on the announcement today from the police minister around putting more police patrols and ramping that up in shopping centres. He's obviously in Townsville today speaking about it. What's your reaction to that policy? Do you welcome it?
We will never stand in the way of more boots in the ground. For the last half a decade, the numbers of police in real terms have fallen, and every Queenslander is demanding action. So let's boil it down. We've got fewer police, weaker laws. Is it any wonder we're in the middle of a youth crime epidemic? So anything that can turn this crisis around, we will back, boots and all. We want to see officers living and breathing in communities. We want more of them, and we want stronger laws so they can do their job. And we will back those blue uniforms every day of the week.
We've seen a stolen vehicle this morning dumped in a common spot in Cambridge Street in Gulliver again. On the morning that the committee is due to sit here in Townsville and get evidence from the public. What's your reaction to that? And more broadly, much of the community thinks that a lot of this committee is window dressing. Do you think that that's a fair assessment for them?
Come and spend the 5 days that I'm spending here, and the Premier would find that Queenslanders are demanding action. And the government sees it as a political problem. I don't. I see it as a law and order problem. I see it as an issue of people wanting to keep their families safe. And when Queenslanders I'm talking to are discussing whether or not they should leave the keys at the front door so that an intruder can just grab them and go, and not go into a bedroom where their kids are at, you know that our priorities as a state aren't measuring up to what Queenslanders demand. That isn't a debate that Queenslanders should be having, whether or not to hide your keys to protect the vehicle that you've worked hard, or leave them at the front door so that your kids aren't in harm's way. That's not the debate that should be had. The debate should be had is, how can we embed consequences for action? How can we unshackle the judiciary to do their job? And how can we get in early intervention and turn the lives around before the next pipeline rip the heart and soul out of this state? That's the debate that the Premier should be having.
I understand you visited the stolen car graveyard in Vincent today and might have copped a bit of curry from one of the neighbours. No, you didn't. You weren't there.
No, I did an early morning gym session. I copped some curry there, I can tell you. I'm still sweating, but no, I haven't been there.
We were told that you might have stopped past. It might have been someone else. But soon after, there was 2 vehicles torched, I understand, there. And it's a familiar spot.
Yeah.
The neighbour was saying 10 cars in September, and apparently not long after the recovery operation, another stolen vehicle arrived at the site to hoon around just to rub salt in the wounds. Would you like to see something more done at that site? Maybe some cameras or something like that?
I'd like to see every Queenslander be kept safe. And if the government was doing its job, you wouldn't have little haunts that have become de facto burnout pads and graveyards for cars. And my heart goes out to those residents, and I am happy to go and have a look at it. I haven't had the chance yet. I got in yesterday afternoon. But it's just a tale of woe, and I just can't stress enough that people love living here. They love everything about the place. It's a place where people matter. It's a livable city, and people just want their community back. And they just want to know that that small group of hardcore repeat young thugs are dealt with. And by the way, that was once 10% only a couple of years ago. That 10% is now 17% of repeat hardcore young offenders. That's greater than 1 in 6. So a bit of truth serum from the state government would go a long way. They have created a generation that know that their rights outweigh the rights of the victim. And it's time to flip that around. Now, I'm not going to give up on early intervention and turning around the next generation, the pipeline. We've got to do something there. But we also have to deal with the crisis we have in the here and now, where kids are carrying knives like they're a fashion accessory, where kids are hanging out of sunroofs, goading the police to come and chase them because they know there is nothing they can do. That is a broken system. And the government see this as a political issue. It's not. It's a community safety issue. It's a life and death issue. And I'd like the Premier to come and spend a week up here and she'd hear it for herself. But it's not just here. It's in every part of the state. And we're hearing it from the Isa, Cairns, Mackay, Rocky, Gundawindi, having a crime forum shortly, north and south of Brisbane, Sunny Coast, Gold Coast, everywhere. But it was this community that called it out first. It was this brave community in 2015, when they made the decision to water down the laws, it was this community that said it will end in tragedy. And this community were bang on the money.
Just on that stolen vehicle from this morning as well, one of our cameras is there to shoot the burnt out vehicles. Another stolen vehicle's come in, started hooning around the other burnt out vehicles, and has run quite close to one of our camera operators. I mean, to see that behaviour where they're flicking off cameras, they come back and just keep driving around, that's something that locals are seeing all the time. Do you think these laws are actually going to stop these kids doing this in the future, even with breach of bail brought back?
That's only one part of the jigsaw puzzle. And they have no respect for residents, for police, for themselves. No respect. And until you fix the broken Youth Justice Act and embed consequences for action, and until you remove that ridiculous provision of detention as a last resort and unshackle the judiciary to do their job, and until you get in and do gold standard early intervention, this merry-go-round that is the broken youth justice revolving door will continue. And Lawrence, I'll never stand in the way of any changes that might even help one Queenslander. Never. And as it was the last time we were at this crisis stage, and the signature policy were these GPS bracelets. And we looked at the legislation and said, but this isn't going to work because a young person can opt not to wear one. And fast forward 2 years and we've had 8 fitted. But I just want the government to listen, and that's why we're here.
Do you support our Mayor's push to establish a banned drinkers register to restrict alcohol sales and reduce crime?
I support listening to people at the coalface, and I heard the response from the Premier on that, and I thought it was disappointing. And it's to the credit of your Mayor, as well as the Mayor of Cairns and the Mayor of Mount Isa, they are listening to their community and they're feeling the pain and they're putting forward solutions. And I think at the very least the government owes it to those people, give them the respect to listen to what their communities are saying. You've got mayors on both sides of politics representing a big chunk of north and far north and western Queensland, and the Premier slammed the door shut on their face. And I'm not going to do that. And I will be meeting your Mayor tomorrow. And I'm sure there'll be no surprise for people to know that we don't sit on the same side of politics, but we sit on the same side of Queensland, and I'm going to give her the decency and the respect to allow her to put things forward on behalf of her community. And we should be listening to every solution that comes forward, every single solution, particularly when it's on behalf of a community that is just in crisis. And I say to her, good on you for having a crack. And I say the same thing to Bob Manning and the same thing to Mayor Slade. Good on them for standing up. And we should look at it and see if it can work.
Just a question from our Toowoomba office as well. What are your thoughts on the state government's decision to abandon Wellcamp?
Well, Wellcamp was a $220 million exercise in political point scoring. It was never about people, it was always about politics. And when the government said it was future-proofing, well, it's difficult to future-proof when you don't own the asset, and the keys will shortly be handed back. $220 million to make a political point against a different colour government in Canberra. And if that doesn't show you everything you need to know about how Queensland is run in this era, well, nothing does. That was never about future-proof. It was about trying to send a message to a Liberal government in Canberra, and no one wins when politicians do that ahead of protecting their people.
And lastly, also, we ran some of the story last night on allegations from an insider at Cleveland Youth Detention Centre. Dale, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I might get Dale to do that.
Just on those allegations made by that former worker, what was your reaction to hearing that?
Oh, look, we know that there are serious issues within our youth detention centres, and certainly I've been out to Cleveland on a number of occasions. I talk with the staff out in that locality regularly. They're not going out there to be punching bags. They're not going out there to be spat on and be assaulted on a regular basis. We know that workers' compensation claims from that facility are going through the roof. It's a tough environment. There's no question about that. But they're not being heard. They're not being supported. They need the resources, they need the legislation sitting behind them to give them the protections that they need in that environment. It's not an easy environment, and we need to be supporting those workers in that particular facility. We now know that they're really struggling to attract staff at Cleveland, and that's symptomatic of the conditions that exist in that particular facility.
Thanks everyone. Thank you very much. Peter, thank you.